The National Endowment for Democracy, NED, is holding its annual Democracy Assembly in China's Taipei, and some people find this surprising. That the meeting is being hosted by NED is not a surprise at all, but that they chose China's Taipei as the venue may be something of a surprise to some people. The NED was formed in 1983 to promote freedom around the world, and to the casual observer, this is a noble and righteous cause. But if we were to look a little deeper, it becomes a lot less noble. The NED is not the righteous campaigner for democracy and freedoms that it claims to be. It's a deliberate cutout for what used to be CIA funding. Its leadership are not promoting democracy, they do the opposite. They promote American interests wherever they are. Now, this might seem to be a conspiratorial view, but it is a view held by many researchers and a very interesting fact sheet from the Chinese government released just a few months ago. People may wish to ignore China's input into this, or even criticize them as being biased against an organization formed as a non-profit by Ronald Reagan. But the well-researched and supported information provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China makes that a very difficult position to defend. The NED does not have the democratic rights of the people in the 100 plus countries in which it operates at heart. It is solely interested in the maintenance of US power. Once the reader embraces that piece of information, the obvious answer to any questions as to why Taipei was chosen as the site of this summit will become clear. Taipei is the capital city of the Chinese province of Taiwan, and the NED are happy when they are prodding US enemies with a sharp stick. So holding a democracy meeting on a Chinese island so soon after the visit by Speaker Pelosi is exactly that in their mind. A stick into the nest to see what comes out, and they hope it will be ants or hornets. Taiwan is a part of China. This much is not disputed by the USA, which owns and funds the NED. It was clarified way back in 1943 by the Cairo Declaration. It was confirmed by the Shanghai Communique of 1972, and it was placed into international recognition by the United Nations, which recently confirmed this when the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, Mr. Stefan Durek, said in August 2022, "The policy of the United Nations on this issue is that we are guided by General Assembly Resolution 2758 from 1971 on One China." UN Resolution 2758, which he was referring to, is the one that expelled the representatives of Chiang Kai-shek from the United Nations. Now, there are, of course, some legalistic interpretations where some people might argue that this doesn't mention Taiwan, and therefore the people of Taiwan are not part of China, but are a separate nation. If that were the case, they would have been provided with a nationality and a place in the United Nations, as was proposed by the United States, but voted against by the General Assembly. They were not. The UN resolution also went on to restore all its rights and recognize the government of the People's Republic of China as the only legitimate representatives to the United Nations. Now, what all this means is that there is only one China, and Taiwan, whether some people like it or not, is a part of that China. Historically, geographically, culturally, linguistically, and ethnically, Taiwan and China are linked. Politically, however, thanks to the likes of NED, they are not. The second surprising reason for choosing Taiwan as the location for any display of democracy is that, until quite recently, Taiwan wasn't a democracy at all, and since becoming one, has not really shone as any kind of beacon. Even the usually right-leaning Brookings Institute in a January 2021 paper conceded that while elections are fair and clean, and the system is strongly supported, the political system does not do so well due to structural factors. In 1991 was the first election in Taiwan. the country was a military dictatorship from 1949 and under martial law under the Kuomintang until 1987. This martial law prevented any form of democracy. Political opponents were arrested. Those that weren't executed during a period known as White Terror were sent to Green Island, a penal colony 33 miles off the coast, which became known as Taiwan's Alcatraz, a prison from which no one escaped. Estimates vary, but several thousand people are known to have been summarily executed during the White Terror period. And this doesn't count the 18,000 or more that the KMT executed before they arrived in Taiwan in a system known as the 228 incident. It's no surprise when these factors are taken into account that the United Kingdom, Canada, and most of Europe, 76 countries in all, gave their votes to the People's Republic of China over the oppression created by the KMT. The United States, of course, voted no. Another surprising fact about choosing Taiwan as some model of democracy is that since becoming one only 31 years ago, the Legislative Yuan, LY, as Taiwan's governing body is called, has failed to impress anyone with its form of governance, which quite often leads to temper tantrums, aggression, and needs security intervention inside the assembly. It would be fair to say that they have not demonstrated any ability to show the world any form of decent governance and have instead become the laughingstock of the international democratic community. Even the USA, with its partisan politics, must look at Taiwan and question the decision to impose Western-style democracy on a group of people clearly unsuited for it. What do I mean? Back in 2009, problems with Taiwan's democracy were so common that a paper was written explaining how and why Taiwan's politicians resorted to fighting. It would be a reasonable assumption that the elected representatives of the people on the island would have learned from this. Sadly for them, they did not. In 2016, there was chaos as members fought each other because they couldn't get their way over holiday cuts. In 2017, members didn't like what was going on, so chairs were thrown and chaos ensued. In 2020, fights broke out in the LY over tyranny. Also in 2020, in an incident that amused some people but disgusted others, pigs' intestines were thrown from one side of the LY to the other. In 2021, there was a brawl in the chamber as members disagreed over COVID policies. Now, these are not isolated incidents. They're so common that as recently as 2017, more papers were still being written in an effort to explain through the lens of Western experts what was going wrong. In truth, these constant fights and brawls are simply examples of how democracy fails the people when those who represent them do so without adequate education and experience of this foreign form of governance. And it's also how an imported form of democracy from a different culture, supported with money, but without the required training and education, has been so poorly implemented. Unsurprisingly, the Brookings paper concludes with the finding that Taiwan's structural impediments to good policy performance are not easily fixed. That was 2021. And to end this on a jocular note, one final point which makes the decision to hold this event in Taipei so close to the end of the year surprising is that just a few days ago, one United States Navy admiral was predicting that China could invade Taiwan by the end of the year. And indeed they could. But given the words of China's president as he opened the National Congress just a few days earlier, it's a fairly safe bet that they won't. But if they did, it might be because NED's 11th Global Assembly of World Movement for Democracy, which takes place between the 25th and 27th of October, might be just too tempting